Hope everybody is doing well today. I think back to when I first became a real Christian, which is what I refer to it as. And at the time, I was working in a call center in a small room with my coworkers, at cubicles. So it was a very kind of intimate setting. And at my job, we either were very busy or we were very slow. And in the slow time, we could kind of do whatever we wanted. I often read books, we talked. I could talk for days about so many interactions with coworkers and stuff that were so interesting. And so they only knew me, as one coworker used to call me, as goody two-shoes Christian girl. And so that was their perception of me. And he was once sharing a life story of his that was this great tragedy in his life, an experience where he got arrested and he was using drugs and all these horrible things happened to him. And so to him, this really changed the course of his life, and he was very embittered and upset, and it was this huge thing. And I looked him dead in the eye and I'm like, oh, the almost exact same thing happened to me. And his eyes just exploded, and he couldn't believe it. And so we talked all about it. And he said, how are you so untouched? How do you, come across as so, And I said, well, that's just the grace of God in my life. I know that. And so he used to, in downtime, he would turn to me and he'd say, tell us a story about when you were bad. And he meant it. He wanted to hear a story about, when you were bad. Tell us a story back when you were bad. And it was such an interesting thing because they all had this perception of me that I didn't have of myself at all. I was very stuck into remembering when I was bad. And that was the person I identified with. I didn't feel like the goody two-shoes Christian girl that they saw. And so they all loved hearing stories of when I was bad. And one of my particular other coworkers, he loved to just hammer me with questions about Christianity and my beliefs. And so often I didn't have the answers because I was really new in my faith in a lot of ways. And so we just had these big discussions, and it was great because it made me have to search for the answers and question myself and what do I believe and what do I think and how to express it. And it was very much an iron sharpens iron. That's one of the scripture verses I wanted to use. It's Proverbs 17. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. So this, really contentious guy that I sat next to for quite a while, just would love to just ask me, really kind of probe me and poke me and make me really think about where I stood. And I thought that was a great thing. And the story that came to mind that I wanted to share was back when I was a bad girl. And I actually this morning I've had a million things that I've considered sharing, and this is the one I think I'm gonna focus on. I was visiting a friend of mine who lived in Kansas City, and we had all been in New York. I don't know when it was in relation. Actually, I'm gonna get sidetracked, I think, and talk about another story. So my friend and my sister and I had all visited New York. My sister was having my friend was actually having the work thing. And so she had a free hotel with her work. So we were like, well, we wanna go to New York, free hotel. Why not? So we all, she was supposed to be at some work conference. She was a teacher. And my sister and I decided, explore New York while my friend was in her conference. And we ended up just going to Times Square. We weren't really sure where to go. This was a million years ago. Goodness, I would have been in my 20s. And, I know the date, I guess. So we ended up going all around New York. We called up our friend that lives in New York. She ended up taking us out all over the place, all over the city. We went to Fire Island and hung out with all of her friends, and we ended up having a fabulous time. We extended our trip. We stayed way longer, way more days than we had planned. And what was really interesting is that when we were there that summer, we came home and we made all these new friends in New York, and it was really cool. And then 9/11 happened. And a lot of the people we were hanging out with, some were firemen. And I hung out with a whole group of all these police officers at one point one night. And so 9/11 hurt on a totally different level for me than it would have maybe a couple months before I had gone to New York. It hit home, the idea of, oh my goodness, all these people I met and, fell in love with and became friends with, they were there, some of them. Some of them were in the actual building and escaped. And like all these police officers that I spent one whole night hanging out with, they weren't part of my friend's friend group. They were just people I met and was hanging out with. And I have no idea to this day if any of them even died in 9/11. I don't know. But so I had such a different context because I'd met and experienced and knew all these people, and that knowing they were part of it, that they were in it, that they were in the thick of it, it hurt and broke my heart so much more. It was so fresh. I had just been there like a month before. We had pictures of us being on the water, and like the Twin Towers were behind us, we had photos of that, and now they're gone. And so it just made this whole experience so much more horrifying and real and heart-wrenching. And it wouldn't have been the same for me or my sister or my friend had we not gone and visited New York. And so I think in this situation we all find ourselves in right now, not only in the quarantine and the COVID fear, but right now in the riots and the just heart-wrenching, seeing all these people hurting. I can't understand how much more it hurts people of color, because I'm not people of color. But that still doesn't mean I don't hurt and bleed, and in knowing my friends, that are of color, it hurts all the more. Iron sharpens iron. You need to befriend someone that is different from you so that you can have a heart for them and understanding, that you can be more compassionate. I can't be someone that I'm not, but I can try to understand someone I'm not. I can try to see things through their eyes by asking them their perspective, by hearing their perspective, by befriending people of different perspectives, if that makes sense. The other story I was going to tell seems very unrelated now. I'm not sure if I should tell it, but I will. So when we were in New York, we became friends with an African-American guy that was really cool, and my friend, the teacher friend, she actually, became kind of interested in him romantically, and so he came down to visit soon after, and she lived in Kansas City at the time, on the Plaza, which is, I've referred kind of going out there before in another live, but so he came down, and I went up to Kansas City, as did another couple, my sister and her boyfriend at the time. Like I said, this was a long time ago, in our 20s. And we went out on the Plaza, drinking, partying, living it up. And then we went to a diner, at like 2, 3 in the morning after the bars close. And so, dimension, it matters. But our friend, he was African American that we were in the diner with. And so we're walking out, so it's 3 girls and 2 guys. One guy is white, and then the other guy is African American. And we're walking out of the diner, and it's probably about 3 in the morning, at least at this point, could even be 4. Very late, very late. And this another African American guy looks me up and down and kind of is like, "Hey, baby, you want to come?" And I'm not exactly sure what he said, but you kind of know that approach sometimes that men take. And I just kind of looked at him and I was like, "No thanks," or whatever. I just kind of was like, not interested, or, I said something along those lines. Well, that really ticked him off, and it totally triggered him, because he's like, oh, you don't like a brother, you don't like a black man, and he started getting, it was all a racial thing to him. And I think I even pointed at my friend, like, I'm walking, you know, with a black guy right now. Why would you assume that about me? Obviously, I don't feel that way. And so I was not as understanding as I appeared right there. Wasn't my reaction. If anything, he offended me. He triggered me. I felt like he was accusing me of something. And so I don't know, I can't remember what I said or my posturing. But so this guy got really angry at me and said a lot of things. And this was as we were walking into our car. Well, we all got in our car. This guy got in his car, and then he started following us. And he was actually driving alongside of us, and he was yelling things out the window. And the driver, who was the boyfriend at the time, started yelling things back at him. And I was actually behind the driver's seat, and I was probably egging it on, I would guess. You know, because he kind of triggered me. I was mad that he was assuming, you know, I was a racist. And so the whole thing, you know, we're driving along side by side, and we actually weren't very far from my friend's house where she lived. So here we are in 2 lanes of traffic like this, and we go to pull in and park because she actually lived on like this 4-lane kind of street. I don't know how to describe it. But so this guy, angry guy, pulled up next to us in an actual lane of traffic. We pulled in a parking spot. He pulled in an actual lane of traffic of a rather busy road. And we're all just sitting in our parked car. He got out, popped his trunk, pulled a gun out of his trunk, and walked over and stuck it in my sister's boyfriend's face. And I'm sitting right behind him. And, you know, he said stuff like, what are you going to say now? And really confrontational, you know, things. And I don't think any of us said a word or reacted at all. I don't recall us saying anything or reacting at all. I think we were all very frozen in fear and didn't know what to do. And, you know, I think the guy kind of woke up to he's like parked in traffic and he's pulled a gun on us and, you know, this is not a good idea. And he pulled the gun back down, threw it back in his trunk, slammed his trunk, got in his car, and drove away. And we all just sat there in utter silence for a minute. And our friend from New York broke the silence by cracking a joke. And he said, what? Y'all never had a gun pulled on you before? None of us had ever had a gun pulled on us before. To him, it was not a big deal. He acted like, oh, this happens. That was his perspective. He lived in New York. He lived in a different city than, you know, our little small town in Missouri that we're all from. He didn't seem that agitated or scared or shook up by it. We were all very shook up by it. So it was kind of neat being able to process it, even with him, you know, that to him it was just kind of like, no big deal. All of us, you know, rather were terrified. But the reason I want to tell that story is that I feel like there were assumptions. We make judgments and assumptions about people. The guy that pulled the gun, obviously I triggered him by saying I wasn't interested. That to him pushed a button, a serious button. He pushed my button. I didn't like what he was assuming about me. We need to stop assuming. We need to ask. We need to have iron sharpen iron. We need to engage in a healthy way to try and get to a place of understanding and loving one another. Assumptions only hurt. How can anyone defend themselves if you just make an assumption about them? The only way is to ask and try and understand. And to come from a place of love and to let assumptions die. We're all in God's image. We are all called to love one another. There are no exceptions at all to that. So Lord, we just ask you to help us love and forgive and stop assuming, and to instead be open. Open our eyes and our hearts and our minds and our everything to love like you, Lord, to reach out and try and extend love. I want to apologize. I want to apologize for everyone that's ever hurt someone. I ask for forgiveness for sins I haven't even committed, but for who my race has committed, Lord. I just, oh, Lord, help us all. Help us all. Only you can do it, God. Only you. But if I encourage others to try, help us to try and love one another better, Lord. We can only do it with your help. In your name we pray.